Welcome back to Your World at 10. Now, the big story tonight is the Kraft Cadbury deal. After much wooing, Cadbury's board has agreed to endorse an enhanced offer by Kraft. The American company will now pay 840 pence for each share of Cadbury versus its previous offer of 745 pence. Of that 800 pence, 500 will be paid in cash and the remaining in Kraft shares. Cadbury shareholders will also receive a special dividend of 10 pence a share. For a complete view of the Kraft Cadbury deal, how it was struck, what it means for Cadbury, and more importantly, what it means for India, we're joined by a whole host of experts. David Faber and Guy Johnson of the CNBC network reporting on that deal. Cadbury India's chairman, C.Y. Paul, in an exclusive interview to CNBC TV 18. And then Sunil Alag, an FMCG veteran, will weigh in with his thoughts on what this deal means. Let's start with David first on how this deal was struck. David Faber.
After some phone calls over the weekend, our hurried trip over to the UK, where the entire Kraft team is right now, Irene Rosenfeld, Kraft CEO, and Roger Carr, the chairman of Cadbury, were able to hammer out a deal in which Carr can tell shareholders he got 850p. Now, 840 of that is the Kraft bid, another 10 in a dividend. They were able to decrease the stock component and significantly increase the cash component, increasing the overall value, but as importantly, taking down Kraft Kraft stock as a percentage of the overall consideration. So much so, in fact, that Kraft no longer needs a vote of its shareholders. So Warren Buffett, when he came out a couple of weeks ago with that strange press release, that was his only opportunity to comment on Kraft shares being undervalued and saying he didn't want to give them a blank check. Now, of course, strangely enough, that may have ultimately helped Kraft's stock price and helped it win Cadbury's hand.
All right, that was David Faber joining us from the US. Now for the UK, CNBC's Guy Johnson joins us from London on what this means for Cadbury in the UK. Guy.
Well, it means 186 years of independence will now come to an end. The management team had held out for a significantly higher offer from Kraft. The language over the last few weeks has made it very, very clear that they felt that Kraft should be paying significantly more, and 850 was the price that we ultimately ended up with. Cadbury shares trading just shy of that today. The merger arbitrage guys maybe saying there's still a little bit of risk that this deal doesn't get done, but we're up by 3.4% on Cadbury stock as we head into the close here in Europe. Over in the United States, Kraft is trading down. You just mentioned the fact that a big chunk of this deal is going to be in Kraft paper. I've been talking to a number of institutional fund managers here in London today. They say they don't want to own that Kraft paper. So what you're likely to see is some flow back across the Atlantic from London to New York. They're going to be selling that stock, and that is going to likely drag down Kraft. We've seen it down today by 2.8%. But what you've got to remember as well is that ultimately there are very few obstacles now for this deal not getting done. They've already got the merger acceptance on both sides of the Atlantic from the regulatory authorities. Shareholders look like they'll go along with management, which has now backed the deal. The only thing that could scupper it, Hershey coming in with a higher offer, but that now looks highly, highly unlikely. Guys, back over to you.
All right, Guy, thanks very much for that. Well, in Cadbury, Kraft will acquire not just an iconic global brand, but one that enjoys an entrenched position in emerging markets like India. Cadbury is estimated to control almost 2/3 of the Indian chocolate market and 1/3 of the confectionery market here, a market where per capita consumption is still very low and hence growth potential very high, and a market in which it enjoys a strong distribution network. Well, Kraft has yet to make those inroads in India. So did India play a big part of why Kraft wants Cadbury? Joining me tonight in an exclusive interview to CNBC TV 18, Cadbury India Chairman C.Y. Paul. Mr. Paul, thank you very much for joining us. A hostile deal that has turned almost friendly after months of negotiation and an increased offer.
Oh, well, first of all, I think the deal is, while it's nearly there, but it has still to get formalized. But assuming that it gets formalized, Cadbury is an iconic brand in India and in the world, actually. Very strong, and in India we are particularly very, very strong. We are the market leaders. In the Kraft strategy, India definitely has played an important part. So if this whole thing goes through, I'm sure it will add to the Cadbury's strength in India, because Kraft has got a wide portfolio, cheese and biscuits and many other things, which are certainly relevant to India. and it will provide them with a very good distribution base and marketing expertise and the Indian knowledge to move forward.
Mr. Pal, not just an important part, but maybe even a pivotal part. Do you think India was a big part of why Kraft was attracted to Cadbury?
Certainly, that's exactly what I mentioned. I think in the Kraft strategy for going in for Cadbury is basically because of a number of countries in which Cadbury is strong, and India is certainly one of them.
All right.
And that's an important part of the Kraft strategy, very clearly.
Yeah, well, Cadbury is synonymous with chocolate in India. What impact will this combination with Kraft have on the Cadbury brand? I know it's counterintuitive to even ask because they're acquiring Cadbury for the brand presence. But do you think that they might choose to alter the brand in any fashion? Or do you think this could have any implications on the brand?
No, not at all. I think, Cadbury brand has got enormous strength in India, and that strength will carry on. Cadbury, as you very rightly said, is synonymous with chocolates, and that is not going to change. Kraft's coming in will only strengthen and broaden the company. That's the way I see it. It's too early to say, but things will unfold as we go along. But I'm quite sure that in no way it will weaken the Cadbury brand.
All right. I understand, Mr. Pal, that you're not at liberty to say much because the deal has yet to be consummated, so to speak. But one final question. Cadbury has a very strong distribution network in India. How will that have to be adapted, if at all, to accommodate Kraft's wider product portfolio? Because many of the smaller outlets that Cadbury retails through are not quite suited to many of the products that Kraft has. So are you anticipating any changes on the distribution end?
Well, see, as of now, we have a fairly wide portfolio in India of products like Cadbury Dairy Milk Chocolate, which is more sensitive to heat at the one end, and Cadbury's Eclairs, which is a hardy product at the other end, which can go into every nook and corner of the country. So we have a very good and wide distribution system. But that system may not exactly fit into Kraft's needs, but will certainly be a great asset in going forward and doing some adaptations to meet specific product needs.
All right, Mr. Pal, thanks very much for joining us. That's the Cadbury India chairman, C.Y. Pal, speaking to us on CNBC TV 18. How easy will it be for Kraft to partake of Cadbury's India success? Well, for an independent view of the impact on India of this deal and this deal on India, I'm joined by FMCG veteran Sunil Alag, the chairman of SKA Advisors. Mr. Alag, thank you very much for joining us at this late hour. What do you think the implications of this deal are? It is now commonly accepted that, emerging market presence like Cadbury has in India was one of the big reasons why Kraft was so attracted to that company.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Kraft right now, the two big products that they have is biscuits, which is really the entire Nabisco range. And then they've also got cheese and dairy products. So biscuits is the big market because the packaged biscuit market is almost around 8,000 crores. Which is way beyond what the chocolate market is. So the opportunity for Kraft is not so much the Cadbury's chocolate, as I view it, as their big entry into biscuits.
In fact, Mr. Alag, you pointed out earlier before we were, sort of went on air with this conversation that Kraft had an opportunity to acquire Britannia in this country, which would probably have given it a stronger position in the biscuit market, as you were pointing out. But that deal never happened, right?
See, from the distribution point of view, Britannia has a wider distribution than Cadbury's, and it's also in a much bigger market. It's also already in dairy products like cheese, and also therefore the better fit would have been Britannia compared to Cadbury's. But from what I gather, Kraft was not interested in having a partner that Danone had in India, and Danone itself was into a big problem with the partner. So there was no way, whilst they bought everything else from Danone, which is the worldwide biscuit business of Danone, India was left alone. So I know that Kraft was looking at how to get back into India. Let me take you back into a little bit of history. Nabisco actually had the first holdings. They bought over what was known as Associated Biscuits, which was Huntley and Palmer and Jacobs in UK, and they actually got Britannia in the first round. Then Nabisco got sold out, and therefore they lost that off. Otherwise, Nabisco was part of Britannia in the 80s. So it's a complete circle for them. Nabisco is back. Even though under the name of Kraft now.
Do you think that the two together, Kraft and Cadbury, will have more distribution clout, or do you think that the distribution needs of Kraft will be a little mismatched with what Cadbury has? So really, how much strength does this give Kraft on ground in India, so to speak?
I don't think that there's a mismatch. I think there's going to be a bit of an overlap, but biscuits goes wider than chocolates does, and therefore Cadbury's will have to learn how to widen their distribution, which today I'm afraid they don't have that kind of distribution that Britannia has, or that Parle has, or even ITC has. The question for Kraft will be that they will now be suddenly competing not only with Nestle, but they will be competing with ITC, Britannia and Parle, which is a different ballgame altogether. So they'll have to see how the current Cadbury management can manage that extension. Let me take you back a little bit in history. Cadbury's did make a foray into biscuits many years ago. It was a failure. And for them now, probably they would have learnt by now on what were the mistakes that they made, and to see how they can match up. And now you have even Horlicks, which is GSK, has entered the biscuit category. So that's a big crowded category with very big players, and it's not going to be as simple as one would think. But Kraft was looking for a platform, and so Cadbury's is giving them the platform. The question is, can the Kraft and Cadbury management now take advantage of the brands and the technology that Kraft has and the platform that Cadbury's gives for it to expand quickly and have a manufacturing setup? So it's there. And then cheese is totally different from what Cadbury's is doing. I mean, that requires refrigeration, which is very different from chocolate. So that again is a completely different distribution network. The only plus point I can see is Cadbury is a big brand name. They're giving you a platform to start off on, but the big Nabisco products will need to expand on it very quickly, and therefore the reflection on the current Cadbury's management will be how quickly can they adapt to Kraft needs. Otherwise, American organizations are very quick at changing people.
All right, I have time for one final question, Mr. Alag, and that is probably the most important determinant of any deal, the culture match, an American organization coming together with a British organization. You have great experience at working with multinational companies. What do you think the likelihood of these two companies being able to make a success of this deal is when it comes to issues like culture?
You see, unfortunately, when I joined Britannia, it was part of a UK company, which was Huntley and Palmer and Peak Freens, and then Nabisco came in. But the American unit at that time didn't think India was a big market. I mean, they got Britannia like buying a packet of surf and getting a bucket free. So they got it as a bucket free. But I think Kraft now has two Indian managers, from what I can gather. One is Sanjay Khosla, who's an ex-Lever guy from India, who's heading the international division in Chicago. And you got Mr. Pant in Singapore, who's looking after Asia, both ex-Lever people. So I think they have enough knowledge of India, even though they've been living out of India for a long time. And to that extent, the American system could soften the blow on Cadbury's, if I may use the word, because you have two people from India already positioned to bring them in. But the Americans have a lot of impatience in terms of results compared to the UK style of management. And I think the two senior Indian managers could soften the blow. But it all depends. I don't know the current Cadbury management very well, but if they are sharp and they're alert, nobody wants to change a successful company, which Cadbury's is. Nobody wants to interfere with the management. So you could suddenly either have two things. One, the current management is able to cope with what Kraft needs, in which case they expand, they grow, and they have bigger opportunities than they had under Cadbury's. Or very quickly, Kraft will try and create a separate division, which is having some common elements of distribution, but running it as independent profit centers. That's the way I see it going.
All right, Mr. Alag, thank you very much for those insights, and thank you for giving us a sense of what it will take for this deal to